Let's go Ravens! What if I told you that a move most fans are overlooking right now could actually be the first clue about what the Baltimore Ravens are planning to do in the draft? And it might completely change how we're looking at this wide receiver room? Because this isn't just about bringing back a player, it might be about setting up something much bigger behind the scenes. But before we dive into this, make sure you've already smashed that like button if you truly believe this team is heading in the right direction. And I want to see the optimism in the comments. Drop something like, Ravens are going all the way. 2026 is our year, because this fan base feeds off that energy. Now let's get straight into what's really going on here. The Ravens have officially re-signed wide receiver Xavier Guillory, a name that some fans might not immediately recognize, but that doesn't mean this move should be ignored. In fact, it's quite the opposite. According to the official team report, Guillory was already with the team during training camp and preseason last year, and now he's back again. That alone tells you something important. This organization sees something in him. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Guillory was originally brought in under the previous regime, yet he's now been re-signed under the new one. That's not something that happens by accident. When two different coaching perspectives agree on a player, that usually means there's real potential there. It's not just about giving someone another shot. It's about believing that player can actually contribute. Now, let's talk about what happened last year. Guillory, who came out of Arizona State as an undrafted rookie, suffered a season-ending broken collarbone during the preseason finale. That's a tough break, especially for a player trying to earn a spot. But even in limited action, he recorded 3 catches for 17 yards, and more importantly, he showed enough to stay on the radar. The most important detail from the report is this: he will compete for a spot on the 53-man roster. Not might compete, not has a chance. He will compete. That wording matters. That's confidence from the organization. Now look at the current wide receiver room. You've got Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Tez Walker, and LaJohntay Wester as the core group. Dayton Wade was also re-signed recently, which adds another layer to this competition. But let's be real, the depth here is still not fully solidified. There are open spots, and that creates opportunity. Guillory enters this situation as a 6 feet 2 inches, 200-pound receiver who put up 22 catches for 339 yards and 5 touchdowns in 13 games during his final college season. Those aren't elite numbers, but they show he can be productive. And when you turn on the film, there's something else that stands out: his movement, his body control, and the way he attacks the ball. There are flashes that remind you of Bateman's style, just in a slightly different form. But here's where things get complicated. The Ravens are widely expected to draft a wide receiver in the upcoming draft. Maybe even more than one. And if that happens, the competition becomes even tougher. Draft picks, especially those taken in the first few rounds, almost always make the roster. That means fewer spots available for players like Guillory and Wade. So now you've got a situation where Guillory is not just fighting against current roster players, but also against incoming talent that hasn't even arrived yet. That's an uphill battle. But at the same time, it's the kind of environment where underdogs can shine if they take advantage of every rep. And this brings us back to the bigger question. The Ravens signing a receiver from Arizona State, could that be more than just depth? Could it be a subtle hint at what they're planning to do in the draft? Is this front office preparing to double dip from the same program, or is this simply about adding competition and evaluating talent? Because one thing is clear, this team is not satisfied with where the wide receiver room currently stands. They are actively looking for upgrades, for depth, and possibly for a future starter depending on how the draft unfolds. And if that's the case, every move, even one that seems minor, becomes part of a much larger strategy. Because when you connect all the dots, it really feels like the Baltimore Ravens are quietly setting the stage for something bigger than just a simple roster move. Think about the timing. The draft is just days away. The team knows the wide receiver room still needs reinforcement. And instead of waiting, they bring back a familiar name in Xavier Guillory, someone who already understands the system, already has chemistry in the building, and doesn't need to start from zero. That's not just a random decision. That's strategic depth. Because here's the reality: if the Ravens go into the draft and select 1 or even 2 wide receivers, the competition in that room instantly becomes one of the most intense on the entire roster. You'd have established names, young developing players, undrafted grinders, and incoming rookies all fighting for limited spots. And in that kind of environment, the coaching staff gets exactly what they want: clarity. Who can separate? Who can make contested catches? Who can produce after the catch? And most importantly, who can be trusted when the game is on the line? Guillory's advantage right now is familiarity. He's already been in the building, already worked through a preseason, and even though his 2025 campaign was cut short due to injury, he's not walking in as a complete unknown. That matters more than people think, especially when you're competing against rookies who are still learning the playbook from scratch. But at the same time, let's not ignore the pressure. Because if the Ravens draft a receiver early, especially in rounds 1 through 4, that player is almost guaranteed a roster spot. That's just how the league works. Draft capital equals opportunity. So for Guillory, for Dayton Wade, and for any other fringe receiver, the margin for error becomes razor thin. Every practice rep matters. Every preseason snap matters. Every route, every block, every special teams play, it all counts. And this is where things get even more fascinating when you zoom out. There's a growing belief that the Ravens aren't just looking for depth, they're looking for a difference maker. Someone who could either complement the current core or potentially rise into a starting role depending on how things shake out. That's why you're hearing so much about them targeting wide receivers in the draft. It's not just talk, it aligns perfectly with what we're seeing. And if that happens, it creates a ripple effect across the entire offense. Because improving the receiver room doesn't just help the passing game, it helps everything. It opens up space. It creates mismatches. It gives the quarterback more reliable options so he doesn't have to rely on improvisation as often. It turns the offense from reactive into proactive. And that's exactly where this team wants to go. You've already seen the discussions about building a stronger supporting cast, about making sure the offense doesn't depend on one player having to do everything. The message is clear: elevate the entire unit, not just pieces of it. So when you look at Guillory signing through that lens, it's not just about him. It's about competition. It's about preparation. It's about creating the best possible environment before the draft even begins. Because once those draft picks come in, everything accelerates. And the players who survive that process, those are the ones who truly earn their place. So now as we move closer to draft night, keep your eyes on this wide receiver room. Because what looks like a small move today could end up being part of a much bigger transformation for this offense. And this is exactly why this moment right now feels so important for the Baltimore Ravens, because everything they're doing, every small move, every signing, every decision, it's all building toward what could be a defining draft for this roster. When you look at the bigger picture, it's not just about adding talent. It's about correcting weaknesses that showed up last season. The lack of depth at wide receiver, the inconsistency at times in creating separation, and the need for more reliable targets, those are real issues that this front office clearly recognizes. And instead of waiting for the draft to solve everything, they're layering the roster ahead of time. That's where Xavier Guillory fits into this story. He represents insurance. He represents competition. And most importantly, he represents a player who already understands what's expected inside that building. But let's take it one step further, because this is where things get really interesting. If the Ravens do draft a receiver early, and that player comes in ready to contribute immediately, then suddenly the entire dynamic of the offense shifts. You're no longer talking about potential or development, you're talking about production right away. And when that happens, it forces everyone else to elevate their game. Zay Flowers continues to grow. Rashad Bateman has to prove he belongs long-term. Tez Walker and LaJohntay Wester fight to solidify their roles. And then players like Guillory and Dayton Wade are battling just to stay in the picture. That's not a comfortable situation, but it's exactly the kind of environment that winning teams create. Because the truth is, the Ravens don't just want a good wide receiver room. They want a dangerous one. They want a group that defenses actually have to worry about.